else. Thank you very much, Dr. Nadia, and it's wonderful to be here. And I'm quite happy to be able to be a part of this series and honored to be the first in the series. So what I've got in terms of a presentation is I have sort of three movements I'm going to go through in the course of talking about why education is so central for community development and community building in a broad variety of contexts. Because this is one of the things that everybody seems to agree on, right? Is that if we're talking about how to build communities, how to make stronger communities, and how to create social change, that education is a central part of that. But we often haven't stopped to think about why. We have some kind of intuitive notion that it's important that people know things, that people learn things, that they do well in educational systems. Maybe we haven't thought it through, maybe we haven't expressed it. And so knowing that this is something that so many different types of actors say, oh, we need to work on education in our, whether it's local community development practice, in organizing our local communities, or in international development. But I want to take a step back and say, what's it doing, right? Why is education something that we all seem to think is so important? And what do we get out of it? And how does its dynamics work? This is the sort of researcher I am, in that I'm always asking, wait, but why does this work? Why does this do the work we're asking it to do and accomplish it? So that's the approach I'm taking here today. And I'm going to talk in kind of three separate segments. The first two segments are based on my previous research with Arab community organizations in New York City, which is the foundation for my forthcoming book. And I'm going to talk about the work that education did in immigrant reception spaces in the United States, which for those of us who are Canadian, it's very different context in the American political system and social system than the Canadian, but some of the grounds are the same, so you can hear that. And then after I talk about that, I'm going to move into talking about the Community Mobilization and Crisis Project, which I think is another example of saying education is the right tool for meeting some of our social change goals and why it works so well for that. So let me quickly bring up my presentation so that you guys can see some images I have for you guys here. So let me start by saying, I want to start by telling the story about how I got into studying education, because I didn't intend to. It wasn't my first goal when I was a young graduate student starting my research. When I set out to talk about what are the kind of important political themes in Arab community life in New York City, which is what I was looking for as a dissertation writing student, I said, you know what I think would be really interesting is if we talked about democracy, right? If I went and saw what people are talking about in terms of democracy. And the reason I thought this was interesting is we just had a presidential election in the US, and because I was starting in late 2008, early 2009. And there's this whole academic conversation about why Arabs don't accept democracy, right? And I knew that entire conversation was ridiculous, right? Because that it just didn't fit. It didn't make any sense. It didn't correspond to what I knew about the Middle East or what I knew about Arabs in diaspora. And so it was this whole like really racist conversation. And I said, I want to disrupt this. I want to look at how people are actually talking and thinking about democracy. And what I found is when I went into Arab community spaces looking for conversations about democracy, nobody was talking about democracy, elections, kind of these basic processes. Some of this was timing. There'd just been an election. So there'd been a lot of get out the vote work among people who were citizens. And some of this, so it was timing in that way. And it was also timing in the sense that the next time a big set of conversations about democracy happened in Arab New York was during the time of the revolutions in 2010, 2011. And that's, if you look at the PowerPoint, the picture on the left is from a pro-democracy protest among Egyptian Americans in New York City. And that one was run in a local paper. But since I was in 2009, so nobody was talking about elections or voting or democracy or anything like that. And so, like many a young researcher, I was like, oh no, what do I do instead? And I realized that what I was finding instead was educational programs. So the photo on the right is a photograph of the youth summer program that I volunteered with. That was one of my 2 field sites for doing research on education at the Arab American Association, which is a social services organization located in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, which is the largest Arab community in New York. And what I found was that educational programs were the backbone, not just of this one organization, but of a whole set of organizations that we're working in different contexts with Arab communities all over the city. That almost every Arab community organization had an educational program or an educational framework to it. And I wanted to know why, right? This was the question I had, is why was education so, oh, we can't see slides? I just got a message about that. There you go. Can you see it now? Sorry, give me 1 minute. Apologize for this. Can you see the slides now? Okay, never mind. I'm going to quit with the screen sharing, and I'm just going to, you guys will just be spared my photographs, and you'll just have to see my face instead. I apologize for that. Oh, wait, we got them back. Hold on, let me try that one more time. Okay. Okay. Apologies for the technical area difficulties. Okay, so anyway, so I got to this this place where I was saying, okay, something's going on with education. Why is it so central to what everybody is doing? And the question that I came up with is that education is this sort of thing that we all tend to agree on, and that it becomes a kind of central consensual reason why people work on, why people do community work. There's two reasons why education is so important for community groups. The first one is that that education serves a number of depoliticizing functions. And so if groups are worried about being seen as too political, being seen as outsiders, being seen as threatening, or being seen as too likely to try to change what's happening, then they will often point to educational work as a way of understanding what they're doing as not political, not dangerous, but a part of bringing people into the community. And so what I've got up in my slides right now is a quote from Hannah Arendt, which I don't agree with in the least, but I think it frames this idea that there's this distinction between politics and education, and that education is non-political. And the sort of political science research I do says that education is a political process because we argue about it. Says that it's a political process because there's contestation over power relationships that happens through the process. And also that it forms us, and that it makes us, in the way Arendt is saying here, that it makes us ready to participate in politics. But we're already ready to participate in politics when we enter the educational sphere. So on the one hand, people have this belief that education serves to make us neutral. And this is in fact enshrined in the US tax code, which is that if you want to be a charitable organization that can give people tax benefits for donating to you, then what you have to do is serve in as an educational function. Right? That's one of the ways you can do it. The other thing is that education is non-controversial fundamentally, in that we believe that both people in communities agree that they need education, and so do the powerful people who determine the funding of organizations, determine the ways that they're able to continue to function, right? Everybody agrees that particularly immigrant groups need education, and particularly children of immigrants need education. And so education becomes an important way for us to talk and think about, for community groups to do the work they want to do, to get funding, to kind of make changes and engage with communities in a way that provide them with resources, in ways that look non-threatening, in ways that are kind of agreeable, and that follow common consensus about what's